Sisters and brothers, it's a great joy to be with you this evening, and I consider it a great honour to be associated with the Essex Community Foundation. And as has already been indicated, this evening we're going to be focusing in on two particular charities and the work that they do to address these issues of loneliness, disconnection and isolation that we're all well aware of affect every part of our society today. Now, in the 1960s, following the revisions to the liturgy associated with the Second Vatican Council in the Roman Catholic Church and similar reforms in the Church of England and other churches, something was introduced to the liturgy that those of you who go to church will be familiar with. If you don't go to church, well, speak to me afterwards, or just twiddle your thumbs for the next 30 seconds or so. But in the 1960s and 70s, a thing called sharing the peace got introduced into church services, where at a certain point in the liturgy, the priest will invite us to turn to our neighbour. Its official title is the Kiss of Peace. Though, of course, I speak here for the Church of England. It's usually the handshake of peace, as we're English. We don't kiss each other. Now, there are two schools of thought about the sharing of the peace. Let me just share with you two responses that I've had from churches. When I served some years ago in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire, a man who'd been going to church all his life and who certainly didn't approve of the introduction of this touchy-feely sharing of the peace in the middle of the service said to me that it was his opinion that the sharing of the peace had been introduced into the Church of England's liturgy by the Hezbollah as a cunning way of preventing ordinary Yorkshire blokes like him from going to church. And then just last year, in a church here in Essex, another man said to me that he loved the sharing of the peace because it was the only human contact he had each week. And he simply looked forward to that moment where somebody held him, just held his hand for a few moments. That's how isolated his life had become. And now I'm thinking of a boy who lives round the corner from here, who was a friend of my son's when they went to the Anglo-European school. And he sat round our table at Bishop's Court, and we're talking about religion. And he'd noticed that there were different religions represented at his school. And he said, well, so-and-so's a Muslim, and, so-and-so's a Hindu, and you're a Christian. He then said, so what am I? What am I? He was disconnected from the whole of his culture and all of its roots, leading a kind of rootless life. And then I'm thinking of what's happened to our society when we know the names of the people in Albert Square, but we don't know the name of our own next-door neighbour. What's happened to... Or I know the names of the Kardashians, but I haven't seen my own sister for 20 years. What's happened to our society? Well, this evening we can't solve the ills of a whole society, but we do know that there are many, many people of all ages. There's boys in their bedrooms right now, on their Xbox, playing games with somebody in Ecuador, but they haven't got any mates to play with in the local community. In one sense, we have never been so connected. And in another sense, we have never been so isolated. So what we are celebrating this evening is people who are trying to do something about that. Trying to bring people together in simple ways so that they can reconnect, begin to discover their humanity, which, excuse me for making a religious polemical point, you can't be yourself on your own. That's a kind of theological point, if you'll forgive me for abusing the rostrum for a moment. You can't be yourself on your own. That we human beings are made for community. And when we don't have community in our families, in our actual communities and in our nation, when that breaks down, we break down. We break down. We become less the people we are meant to be. We discover ourselves when we start connecting with each other in all kinds of ways across generations. And we're here to celebrate the fact that these groups, that the Essex Community Foundation supports and champions, are trying to make a difference. So, you don't really want to hear from me anymore. Let me consult my notes and introduce to you the first of the groups we're going to hear from. I've been told by them not to make sure we pronounce it Cavs, not Chavs. They've told me that mistake often gets made. It's Cavs. And Cavs, from Castle Point, is simply a befriending project, dealing and speaking and ministering to isolated people. And I'm going to now simply let them tell something of their story, and on your behalf, welcome Vicky, who is the Senior Befriending Coordinator. And befriending is what Cavs Befriending Service is all about. And Jenny, who I think is a volunteer, is that correct? Jenny's a volunteer with the service. Is anybody else going to be speaking? Have I got that right? My notes have not let me down. So would you please welcome from Cavs Befriending Service, Vicky and Jenny. Very much indeed for that very powerful and moving story, Jenny, particularly to hear about how doing this work has so brought such blessings to your own life. It is in giving that we receive, and your story illustrates that very, very powerfully. Thank you very much. In a moment, we're going to move from befriending people in their homes to the shed at the bottom of the garden. But before that, let me tell you one of my favourite stories, which I think illustrates what the Community Foundation is really about. So, by the way, you may have heard this story before. I mean, I'm a bishop in the Church of England. I trot out the same old stories over and over again, but I am of the view that, a good story is worth telling more than once. I'm sure that Jesus told the Good Samaritan more than once. So anyway, a man dies, and to his great surprise, when he gets to the pearly gates, he discovers there are two doors. And one door, by the way, this isn't I can see you looking very excited. It's not a funny story. I can see. It's just a story, okay? There's no punchline. It's not a joke. Sorry about that. But anyway, so you shouldn't be laughing at the moment, okay? Because it's not supposed to be funny. So a man dies. There's people laughing in the middle there, so please, this is a serious story. Man dies. He gets to heaven, and to his great surprise, he sees there are two doors. One door says heaven. The other door says interesting discussion about the concept of heaven. And everyone is queuing up at the second door. And for me, in a nutshell, that story tells us something else about the culture that we live in now. That we kind of live in a culture where we quite like to keep things at arm's length. As was said, by the way, this one is supposed to be funny, so it's okay to laugh at the end of this one. It has been said that most people want to serve God, but in an advisory capacity. We love to theorize, we love to keep it at arm's length, but we don't necessarily want to enter through the door that says heaven and actually live it. And it seems to me that's what's so exciting about the Essex Community Foundation, is that the Essex Community Foundation is gathering together people who don't just want to talk about making the world a better place, don't just talk about there's all these needs in the world, or also, don't just wring your hands in despair, actually saying we could make a difference. And the way that we can make a difference is by bringing together resources and people and ideas and needs, and then doing something, whether it's a really small something or in some cases huge colossal something. But that's what's exciting about it. Its vision is to do something that will make a difference. And that's why ever since I've been Bishop of Chelmsford, it's been a joy to be involved with Essex Community Foundation, and always inspiring to hear what people do. So now we turn to the shed at the bottom of the garden. And this is such an interesting and exciting thing, which I have to confess I had heard nothing about until this morning, really. And I will, of course, hand you over to the experts in a moment. But this is really the whole kind of men's shed thing is to address that particular issue. I mean, what is it about us men? But many men are very, very isolated, not knowing how to build friendships and relationships. And this is directly addressing that great need in our society in an incredibly creative and imaginative way. And the shed in Malden that we're going to hear about in particular is one of, have I got it right here, 350 across the UK. So this is a nationwide movement with a real foothold here in Essex. So I'm delighted to welcome Hamish McDermott, who is the Essex Shed Network Coordinator, and Phil, who you are the head honcho for the Malden. Is that the correct term? For the honcho isn't the term. Oh, right. You may want to adopt it. Of the men's shed in Malden, we really look forward to hearing about what you do. Thank you.